Now, as we get started, I just want to be very conscious of everybody's time and how much time do we have today for the rest of the meeting?
At least half an hour.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to pop up my screen here. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right. So tonight we're going to talk about emotional intelligence for leaders, which I love. I love leadership. So that is me. I am an executive coach, a speaker, an entrepreneur. I do facilitation. I wrote a book. I spent 20 years working in corporate communications. And I have all these little certifications that you see on the bottom of the screen there. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about emotional intelligence. I'm going to show you the EQI 2.0 model. So there are several models, but this is the one I use, and it is broadly used around the world. And I'm going to dig into that a little bit, into the 5 different areas of emotional intelligence. And then we're going to talk about how to strengthen EQ. And I'm going to give you a heads up now, because when we're done, I'm going to ask you what you're taking away from the conversation today. So just to prepare you for that. So what is emotional intelligence? So this is how the creators of EQI 2.0 define it. And it is basically people skills. So a set of emotional and social skills that influence how we see ourselves, how we express ourselves to others, how we develop and maintain relationships, how do we cope with challenges that we come across. And then how do we use emotional information, our own emotions or other people's emotions, in an effective and meaningful way to make decisions and move forward. So here's kind of a summary of the difference between EQ and IQ. What's really lovely about this is EQ can be developed. So that means with practice, you can grow your EQ. I just actually recently read an article that was interesting that says IQ can also be developed, which I didn't know before. But IQ refers to more of the intellectual, analytical, logical reasoning, numbers, language, things like that. Whereas EQ is more about how you see the world, how you interact with the world, how you express yourself, your motivation and your intuition. Why is it important for leaders? So I think Jocelyn talked about these things. Higher personal performance. Studies have shown that people with higher EQ or leaders with higher EQ will experience higher revenues. They have 4 times better employee retention. So more emotionally intelligent leaders tend to keep their employees better than others. They can handle conflict better, and they inspire trust more. And they are also better at motivating and inspiring employees. Interesting. There is a study that shows that people with average IQ scores outperform people with high IQ scores 70% of the time when they have higher emotional intelligence. So you can be really, really smart, but if you have higher EQ, you're going to be more effective than somebody with a higher IQ, which is great news because we can work on EQ. So this is the EQI 2.0 model. There are other models. So there's one called the Profile of Emotional Competence. There's one called Trait Emotional Intelligence Questionnaire, Wong's Emotional Intelligence Scales. So there are other models, but what I like about this one is it has been administered over 1 million times across the world. It is reliable and valid. And it's really easy for, the reports are really great and it's easy to understand. So this particular model was developed by a gentleman, a psychologist. He was called Ruvan Baron, and it has 5 different areas. And then in those areas, you'll see 3 different subscales within each area of emotional intelligence. So I'm going to dive into each of these 5 areas a little bit. Self-perception is about knowing ourselves. What are we really great at? What are we not so great at? What is our inner strength, our confidence, our resilience? And what is the impact that we have on others? And also our ability to learn and grow and stand up for ourselves as well. This next area is self-expression. So how does the world see us? How do we express our feelings? How do we talk about what we want or what we need? Do we communicate openly with other people? Or are we more reserved? Do we keep things in? Do we defend our rights and values? Are we self-directed? So do I have to wait for someone to come and tell me what to do? Or do I go out in the world and do things because I believe that it's the right thing to do? And can I act independently and autonomously? And then interpersonal. So these are all about how do I interact with other people? Am I responsible? Do I do what I say that I'm going to do? Do I inspire trust? Am I compassionate and empathetic? Empathy is a huge skill when it comes to dealing with people. And there's 3 levels of empathy. So there's the intellectual level. I see what you're feeling, or I know what's going on. There's the cognitive level where you, that's not right. I don't know the word. But there's the level where you actually feel what they feel. You understand what it means to feel what they feel. And then there's the level that you act. So you see, you feel, and you act. And that's the compassionate level where you understand what somebody's going through and you do something to support them. And decision making. So how do we use information about emotions to make decisions? How do we take in that information and help us to solve problems? How do we understand the impact that our emotions have on the decisions that we make and the things that we do? And how do we make that balance between emotions and logic and stay objective? Recognizing bias. Are we aware of some of those biases that we have? And how do we stay calm and respond to situations rather than reacting on impulse when something happens? And then stress management. So this is all about how do we manage stress? Are we flexible? How do we cope? Can we be optimistic even when things are bad? And how resilient are we? And I think in the last couple of years, this has been pushed to the brink to see, really how resilient we can be with COVID. So I'm going to pause there. And I want to know if anybody has any questions, or if that kind of makes sense, or if, what's coming up for you right now.
Keri,
Yep.
somebody that's a people pleaser.
Yeah. So that's really about how others see you. And just like anything, emotional intelligence is about balance. So if you are on that far end of doing everything you can to make people happy, that is at your expense, right? So what are you taking away from yourself to be able to give so much?
Is that emotional intelligence though? Is that part of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's what I've been told, and I've been told I'm a people pleaser. I was questioning it.
Well, I mean, that's a really good question, because there are two things, and this is part of self-awareness. So there's how I see myself, and then there's how others perceive me. And they're not always the same. So when somebody says you're a people pleaser and you really think about it, do you go, yeah, you know what, I am. That's a problem for me. Or do you go, maybe sometimes I am. I like people to be happy, but it's not a problem for me. Does that make sense, Lynn?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I have one other question if nobody else has one. Self-active, how do you say it? Active.
Actualization.
Sorry, I couldn't remember how to say it. What does that mean?
So that means pursuing goals that are meaningful to you and doing work that's important to you and learning about things, learning and growing and challenging yourself to be better. So I don't know if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
So self-actualization is the top. So,
Right.
Once you meet all those physical needs and then you meet all those emotional needs, belonging, all that, self-actualization is, I am doing what I enjoy. I am making a difference in the world. I feel good about it. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm challenging myself. That's self-actualization.
Thank you.
And
Oh, sorry. I don't know if I'm going to go off track here or not, but when I was in my misspent youth and I was at university, I was only doing moderately well, And my psych prof came into me one day and he said, Anne, I think you have to know something. You have to have an AQ as well as an IQ. That was the first time I'd heard that type of phrase. And meaning an accomplishment quota. And it kind of set me back because I had gone through high school with degrees, never did anything, and figured I could still keep on doing that. Although I don't even think I thought it through. I think I just waltzed in, And once I got thinking that through, it made a lot of sense to me. Unfortunately, I did think it through. So your EQ is in addition to that. And I really like that. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense too. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. So a couple of things as you're talking, a couple of things come up for me. And one of them is growth mindset and fixed mindset. And the fixed mindset is, and maybe you guys have talked about this before, but fixed mindset is really, I am born with certain talents and skills and intelligence, and I got to make that work for me. And growth mindset is, I'm going to figure it out. I can do this, whatever it is, I'm going to figure it out. And obviously growth mindset is the preferred, right? When you're trying to, especially for women who are trying to build a business. Okay, I'm going to keep moving.
fascinating.
Okay, can you see my screen again, or could you still see it?
Yes, we could still see it.
Okay. All right. So how do we strengthen EQ? Because it's nice to know what it is, but it's even nicer to know how do I get better at it? So self-awareness and mindfulness. So this is really about noticing what's going on. One of the terms I've heard is notice and name. And it's not about judgment. It's not about saying, oh my gosh, you're such an idiot for thinking that or feeling that. It's about, I am feeling this right now. What is that about? Why do I feel this way? What am I going to do about it? So if I'm really frustrated, for example, with somebody because I don't feel like they're they've done what I'm expecting them to do, then I have to stop and think, I'm really frustrated right now. I don't want them to know that I'm frustrated because I don't want them to feel bad about things. I want to be the kind of leader who teaches them how to grow and inspires them to do better. So taking that minute just to be self-aware and figure out, how am I going to take this emotion and use it in a productive manner when I'm dealing with somebody else. It's also about understanding, what are you proud of? What is important to you? What are your core values? When I work with leaders, I always get them to do a core value exercise where they articulate, what are those values that are your bottom line? What are those things that you will not compromise on? And how does that show up for you as a leader? And think about too, when am I happiest? What am I doing when the time is just flying by and I'm not even noticing? And what are the patterns in my life? So just taking that time to be self-aware, to be mindful. And there are tools that can help you do this. There's all kinds of personality tests. I've taken the Myers-Briggs, DISC, something called True Colors that I do, that helps you to understand kind of who you are and how you show up and how that might be different from other people. And every time I take those tests, it's not like I learn a whole lot new about myself, but I'm reminded about how other people might see me. And then also asking for feedback. So it's really hard for leaders to go to employees and say, hey, give me some feedback. How can I be a better leader? But one thing you can do is say, what am I doing as a leader that you want me to keep doing? What am I doing that you want me to stop doing? And what am I doing, or what am I not doing that you wish I would do for you as your leader? And that's an easier way for employees to give you feedback that you can take and use and implement. Okay, notice how your emotions affect your decision making. So this could be things like procrastination. You know, you have those tasks that you will just put to the side, find anything else. For me, if I have something I don't feel like doing, I will go and clean my house. I'll find anything. I'll reorganize a drawer, whatever it is. Procrastination. Do I tend to really worry about things and overthink them, or make up stories about, catastrophes that might happen? Another one is avoiding. So, for example, when you have an employee that you have to have a difficult conversation with, to maybe address some poor performance or something, those are conversations a lot of people will just avoid because they are uncomfortable. So seeing that in yourself and understanding, how are my emotions affecting how I show up in my decisions? Focus on your strengths. So I know that sometimes people say, oh, we gotta work on our weaknesses so we can become better at those things. And in some cases, being more skilled at something you're not very good at is very helpful. But when you focus on your strengths, you actually are more likely to sustain your growth in that area, because when you start doing something that you're already good at and then you become better and better at it, it feels great. When you try to work at something that you're not so good at and it's hard and difficult and challenging, then that's not as sustainable. And when you focus on your strengths, that becomes your superpower. And you can also recognize, where are the weaknesses and who do I need to bring on my team to help me fill those gaps? Allow yourself to be known. So this is really about vulnerability. And if you've ever read Brené Brown, she talks a lot about this, being vulnerable, which is sometimes hard for a leader because often we feel like, I need to do this on my own. I have to prove myself, or I can't let people know that I'm struggling because they'll lose faith in me. or I don't want to burden them with my problems. But what you're doing there is not trusting them to be able to support you when you are going through something difficult. You're closing them out. Whoop, knocked my mic there. You're closing them out. So open up a little bit. Allow yourself to be known. And I don't mean, talk about all the gory details of everything in your life, but share, be open. I had a leader once that I worked with who was going through some fertility challenges. And it was really impacting how she showed up to work. She was really stressed, super emotional, and her team could feel it. And they were not happy, but they didn't understand why. They just knew my boss is miserable. And she didn't want to talk about it. And I get that. You don't want to share your whole personal life story, but even to simply say, hey, I'm going through something really challenging personally, and I just need you to give me some grace for a little while. Because people want to support you. People want to be helpful. Choose courage over comfort. So this one, I think about those difficult conversations. For example, I had an employee who, when she came to work, she dressed very provocatively. So she was a beautiful woman, but short skirts, lots of cleavage, and people didn't take her seriously. And she had many male bosses before me who had tried to address the situation, and just nothing clicked. It wasn't effective. So one day I went into our office when she was wearing, a very tightly fitting, revealing outfit. And I said to her, you are one of the smartest, most effective, hardworking people I know. And I don't ever want people to doubt your abilities because of the way you dress. And having that conversation made her aware, not that she was doing anything wrong, but that this is how people perceive you. And that was an uncomfortable conversation, but it helped her to be able to reflect on that and make a choice about, how do I want people to see me? And then self-care. And as women, I feel like sometimes this is the last thing on the to-do list. We are so busy taking care of everybody else that we don't take the time to take care of ourselves. But we cannot pour from an empty vessel. So we have to make sure that we're getting the right sleep, that we're getting some exercise, that we're spending time with friends, that we're taking time to take care of ourselves so that we're in a better position to take care of everybody else. And also to be an example for other people, right? When we are busy helping everybody else all the time, we're showing those other women who are looking up to us that, oh, this is how it should be. That's what a good woman is. But when we say it's important to take care of yourself and we demonstrate that through our own actions, then we show them it's important for them too. And then as a coach, and speaking to a couple of coaches in the room as well, coaching works when it comes to increasing emotional intelligence. And I'll show you a little bit how that works. So when I work with somebody, we do the EQI 2.0 assessment. And so in those 5 areas, you get a score. And then within the 3 areas, which add up to 15, you get scores in all of those areas. So we can take a look at it and talk about how does this relate to how you feel about yourself? What are you learning from some of these scores? What are areas that you want to focus on, like strengths that you really want to leverage? what are some areas that you think maybe you need to work on? And it's not about judgment. It is just about, here's a snapshot in time. Here's a score today. And, where do I want to grow that? Setting some goals and then growing that emotional intelligence so you can be more effective, so you can have stronger, more effective relationships, so you can have a greater sense of well-being and an overall better quality of life. So with EQI, they have 3 different reports. So there's the workplace report, which just basically gives you a score in each of those areas, and then gives you some detail on each of those scores. Then there's the leadership report, and that just has a bar that compares your score to the top half of anybody who's completed the assessment before, who has identified as a leader. So you'll see, where do I fit in compared to other leaders? And then it also has some tips and key points on how does this particular score show up in leadership, and how, what you can do about it, or how might people perceive you. And then the 360 is about getting feedback from other people. And this one's hard because you have to get feedback from other people and you have to hear what other people say. But in the report, it'll show you where there might be gaps. So you might see yourself as being, very self-aware, where your team might say, not so self-aware. And then you can look at that and go, oh, okay, so how do I grow in this area? I always want to leave people with resources if you want to learn more about EQ. And here are some really great resources. So MHS is the organization that administers the EQI. And they have some resources on their website. And then 6seconds.org, they have a different assessment, but they have a lot of really great information about emotional intelligence. And there's the CEO of that company does a lot of videos on YouTube, and they're great and fairly short and very helpful. There's also Positive Psychology, which has more information about emotional intelligence. And then Daniel Goleman, who is a coach and talks about emotional intelligence as well. So those are some really great resources if you're looking to learn more about emotional intelligence. And this is me. So I, with 2 co-authors, I wrote a book called Mind the Gap, Navigating Your Leadership Journey. And emotional intelligence is one chapter in the book, but it's really about all of those skills and things that you encounter as when you take on a leadership role. All those things that when you're learning to be whatever it is that you're learning to be. So if you're, becoming an accountant, or you're becoming a plumber, or a nurse, or whatever that is, you spend 4 years learning to be really great at that. And then you get into that role, you're doing a good job, and you get rewarded with a promotion. Now you have to lead other people, and you don't get any more training or support to make that shift from doer to leader. And so what Doug and Heather and I wanted to do was to give people a resource to help them in those leadership roles. I've also got a website that is listed there on the bottom, and I do a newsletter, which I send out every 2 weeks, all about leadership topics. And if you want to book a meeting with me, if you're interested in EQ, if you think, hey, that report sounds amazing, I would love to do that. Or if you know somebody else who would love to, you can also, find time in my calendar to do that.
My goodness, absolutely amazing. Are there any questions?
I can't believe how much you put together in such a short time, and my mind is just going crazy. Oh, that was very meaningful.
Thank you, Anne. I actually cut out a few slides.
Oh no, I could have been more baffled. Yeah, I have someone I really want to pass this information on to, because I think she's a very young woman and in her first role as a leader in a business, and I think this would be very helpful.
Yeah, leadership is hard. It's hard work, and it's complicated because people are emotional, and you can't always predict how people are going to behave or react. So yeah.
Keri, do you just deal with business people, like leadership in business? Because I mean, there's also leadership in families. I mean, if you're a parent and your emotional needs aren't being met, how do you satisfy the needs of your family, their emotional needs?
Yeah.
So wouldn't that play a factor that way as well? Like,
Yes.
Yeah,
that's a can of worms for sure. It's not where I work. It is, I mean, I'm a mom and I'm a wife, and so I get it, and I do apply that emotional intelligence when I'm at my best. I apply it when I deal with my family. But yeah, I haven't used it to help other people in their role as parents and spouse. Yeah, but I could see how it would be helpful. I actually, I had a couple who she had done it before, and she was interested in doing the assessment again, but she also wanted her husband to do it as well. So they both did it, and then I debriefed them individually, and then, I haven't talked to them since then, so I don't know how they implemented it, but it was interesting. And I think it's interesting to go through that experience with somebody else, to have that shared experience of, the same reflection on where you're at. Another question I get, and a question I had when I first started learning about emotional intelligence is there a difference between scores in men and women? And the surprising thing is that overall, they're pretty much the same. They have about the same scores on average. However, when you break it down and you go into those 5 subscales, there are areas where men are higher and other areas where women are higher. So for example, men might be higher in the confidence and the self-esteem, and women might be higher in that emotional expression area. So there is imbalance throughout the different areas of the scale, but overall, men and women share the same level of emotional intelligence on average.
Are we talking about maturity here? Like,
well, that's a really good point, because as you get older, in general, emotional intelligence increases. And I would just call that wisdom, right?
Not taking things as personally. Sorry, Lynn.
That's okay. That was my fault.
Yeah, as we're older, we're not taking things quite as personally as we did when we were younger. It's like,
yeah. And some people never grow up. They keep making the same mistakes over and over again. They don't learn.
Yeah.
If there are no more questions, I will stop the recording. This recording will be placed on our channel on YouTube with your permission, Keri?
Yes.
All right. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.